Chapter 1. The Forbidden Document. What is the Testament of Solomon? Deep within the archives of ancient manuscripts lies one of history's most enigmatic texts. The Testament of Solomon presents itself as the first-hand account of King Solomon himself, describing how the wisest king of Israel commanded and controlled 72 demons during the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem. This document, written in Greek and dating from sometime between the 1st and 5th centuries of the Common Era, claims to reveal the secret knowledge that allowed Solomon to subjugate the forces of darkness and compel them to labor on God's holy sanctuary. The text was unknown to the Western world until the 19th century, when scholars began examining Greek manuscripts preserved in European libraries. Unlike the canonical books of the Bible, the Testament of Solomon had survived only in scattered copies, hidden away in monastic collections across the Mediterranean. The manuscript tradition is complex, with numerous variations and additions accumulated over centuries of copying and translation. Some versions are brief, while others expand to considerable length with elaborate descriptions of demonic hierarchies and magical practices. According to the narrative framework of the text, Solomon received a magical ring directly from the archangel Michael. This ring, engraved with a pentagram or seal, granted its wearer authority over all demons and spirits. The story begins when a young worker on the temple construction, a boy beloved by Solomon, begins to waste away. Each evening, a demon named Orneus appears and steals half the boy's wages and sucks away his vitality through his right thumb. When Solomon learns of this affliction, he prays fervently, and the angel Michael delivers the ring with instructions on its use. Armed with this divine instrument, Solomon summons Orneus and commands him using the power of the seal. The demon, now bound to obey, reveals the invisible structure of the demonic realm. Solomon then forces Orneus to bring other demons before him, one by one, creating a chain of supernatural servitude. Each demon is interrogated about its nature, its methods of causing harm to humanity, and most importantly, which angel or divine name has power to thwart it. After this interrogation, Solomon assigns each demon a specific task in the construction of the temple, transforming agents of chaos into unwilling servants of divine purpose. The testament claims to be Solomon's own written record, set down so that future generations might understand the hidden mechanisms of spiritual warfare. The text frequently addresses its readers directly, with Solomon explaining his motivations and describing his wonder at the revelations he receives. This literary device creates an intimate quality, as if the reader is being entrusted with dangerous knowledge that has been carefully preserved across millennia. Scholars recognize that the Testament of Solomon was not actually written by the historical King Solomon, who reigned in the 10th century before the Common Era. The Greek language of composition, the cultural references within the text, and the developed angelology all point to a much later date of creation. The work belongs to a genre known as pseudepigrapha, texts attributed to ancient biblical figures but composed centuries after their deaths. This was a common practice in the ancient world, a way of lending authority to new ideas by connecting them to revered ancestors. The relationship between the Testament and the biblical account of Solomon is both intimate and complex. The Hebrew Bible portrays Solomon as a king of legendary wisdom, a builder of the magnificent temple, and unfortunately, a ruler who eventually turned to idolatry through the influence of his many foreign wives. The book of 1 Kings describes how Solomon's wisdom exceeded that of all the people of the East and all the wisdom of Egypt, how he could speak about plants from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop growing out of walls, and how he could discourse on beasts and birds and reptiles and fish. Yet the biblical text says nothing about demons or magical rings. The Testament of Solomon takes these biblical hints about extraordinary wisdom and supernatural knowledge and expands them into an entire system of spiritual power. Where the Bible remains silent about the methods of temple construction, the Testament fills the void with accounts of demons hewn into stone, demons hauling massive blocks, and demons crafting the intricate decorations of the sanctuary. The text transforms Solomon from a wise king into something approaching a magician or spiritual adept, someone who has penetrated the mysteries of both heaven and the abyss. Chapter 2. The Ring and the Seal, Instruments of Divine Authority. The transformation of Solomon from builder to demon master began with a single gift from heaven. According to the Testament, as Solomon struggled with the construction of the temple, tormented by a demon who was draining the life from his most skilled craftsman, the young king turned to prayer. He prostrated himself before the altar and begged God for the power to complete the sacred task. His prayer did not go unanswered. The archangel Michael descended from the heavenly realms, bearing a gift that would change everything. In his hands he carried a simple golden ring, yet this was no ordinary piece of jewelry. Upon its surface was engraved a seal, a pentagram formed from interlocking triangles, and within this geometric pattern resided the power to command the invisible hierarchies of the spiritual world. The ring bore the most sacred and powerful of all names, the ineffable name of God Himself, though the Testament preserves this name only in fragmentary forms, perhaps out of reverence for its sanctity. Michael instructed Solomon in the proper use of this divine instrument. The ring was to be wielded not through Solomon's own authority, but through the authority of the divine name it carried. When pressed against a demon, or when its seal was shown to a spiritual entity, the creature would be bound by the power of heaven itself. The demons would have no choice but to submit, for they were confronting not merely a human king, but the very signature of the Creator. The mechanics of this spiritual technology, as described in the Testament, reveal a sophisticated understanding of names and symbols as vessels of power. In the ancient Near Eastern worldview, a name was never merely a label but contained something of the essence of the thing named. To know the true name of a being was to have power over it. The name of God, therefore, represented the ultimate authority, the source from which all other powers derived and to which all other powers must yield. The seal upon the ring functioned as a kind of spiritual sigil, a visual representation of divine authority that demons could not resist or counterfeit. The geometric pattern itself, with its interlocking triangles forming a pentagram, has been interpreted by later magical traditions as representing the harmony of the elements, the union of microcosm and macrocosm, or the 5 wounds of Christ. Whether the original authors of the Testament intended such elaborate symbolism remains unclear, but the basic principle was evident. The seal marked its bearer as an agent of divine will. Solomon's use of the ring established a pattern that would repeat throughout his dealings with the demonic realm. He would confront a demon, either personally or through an agent bearing the ring, and would demand that the creature reveal its name and nature. Once the demon had identified itself, Solomon would press the seal against it or display the ring's power, binding the spirit to his service. The demon would then be assigned specific tasks in the construction of the temple, its supernatural abilities harnessed for sacred purposes. This binding was not simply physical, but carried spiritual and cosmic implications. The demons, according to the Testament, were not destroyed or cast into the abyss, but were instead compelled to participate in the construction of God's dwelling place on earth. Their very rebellion against heaven was turned back upon itself, as the enemies of the divine order became unwilling servants of that same order. The temple, that symbol of divine presence among humanity, would be built partly through the forced labor of those who had once sought to corrupt and destroy. Chapter 3. The Temple Construction and Demonic Labor, a Supernatural Building Project. The construction of Solomon's temple became a convergence point of the earthly and the otherworldly, where the labor of human craftsmen mingled with the forced service of bound demons. According to the Testament, Solomon did not merely use the demons as general laborers, but assigned each spirit to tasks suited to its particular nature and abilities. The king demonstrated a practical understanding of demonology, matching supernatural talents to architectural needs with the precision of a master builder organizing his workforce. The text describes how certain demons were set to quarrying and transporting the massive stones required for the temple's foundation. These were not ordinary building materials, but enormous blocks of hewn rock, some weighing many tons, which had to be moved from distant quarries to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The demons assigned to this work possessed strength far beyond human capacity, able to lift and carry loads that would have required dozens of men and elaborate mechanical systems. Yet even these powerful spirits worked under Solomon's command, their ancient might reduced to the status of oxen yoked to a plow. Other demons were tasked with more specialized work. Some were commanded to cut and shape timber, transforming the cedar logs brought from Lebanon into the beams and panels that would line the temple's interior. These spirits worked with preternatural speed and precision, their tools guided by hands that never tired and eyes that could perceive flaws invisible to human craftsmen. The wood they prepared was said to be perfectly straight, without knot or blemish, each piece fitting seamlessly with its neighbors, as if the tree had grown already shaped for its destined purpose. Still other demons were set to work on the temple's more delicate elements. The Testament mentions spirits whose task was to prepare gold for gilding, beating the precious metal into sheets so thin they seemed to capture and hold light itself. These same demons might overlay the temple's walls and furnishings with this gold, creating surfaces that would gleam in the light of oil lamps like captured sunlight. The irony was not lost on the text's authors. Beings associated with darkness and corruption were compelled to create beauty and prepare materials for the worship of the God they had rebelled against. The organization of this demonic workforce reveals something of Solomon's character as portrayed in the Testament. He was not simply a king wielding arbitrary power, but a careful administrator who understood the resources at his disposal, even when those resources were supernatural and potentially dangerous. Each demon was interrogated about its abilities and nature, then assigned to work that would utilize its strengths while minimizing the risk it might pose. Spirits of great physical power were given tasks requiring strength, but not subtlety. Those with knowledge of materials and craftsmanship were assigned to more refined work. The most dangerous demons, those whose very presence might corrupt or harm human workers, were likely set to tasks that kept them isolated from the general population. This systematic approach extended beyond mere labor assignments. Solomon established hierarchies among the demons themselves, appointing certain spirits as overseers of others. The Testament describes how some demons were given authority to command their fellows, creating a structure that mirrored the organization of human labor on the construction site. This hierarchy served both practical and symbolic purposes. It ensured efficient work while also demonstrating that even the structure of demonic society could be brought under divine order through Solomon's authority. The temple's construction thus became a kind of cosmic drama, playing out the great theme of order imposed upon chaos. The demons, beings of disorder and rebellion, were forced into a pattern of disciplined labor. Their work was not random destruction or the creation of monuments to their own power, but the building of a house for the God they had opposed. Every stone they set in place, every beam they lifted, every surface they adorned with gold became a testament to their subjugation and to the sovereignty of the divine will exercised through Solomon's ring. Chapter 4. The hierarchy of hell, the ranks and systems of the 72 demons. Yet the demons Solomon commanded were not equals in power or station. The Testament reveals that these 72 spirits possessed their own intricate hierarchy, a structure of authority that predated their subjugation and persisted even under Solomon's dominion. According to the text, the demonic realm mirrored earthly kingdoms in its organization, with titles and ranks that would have been immediately recognizable to those familiar with royal courts and noble houses. At the summit of this dark aristocracy stood the kings, 4 demons, who held dominion over all others. These were not merely powerful spirits, but beings of immense authority, each commanding vast legions that numbered in the tens of thousands. The Testament identifies Baal as the first of these kings, a spirit said to govern 66 legions of lesser demons. His power was matched by Paimon, who ruled over 200 legions, and Beleth, commanding 85. The fourth king, Asmodeus, held authority over 72 legions, his name already ancient and feared long before the Testament was written. Beneath the kings served the dukes, a rank of considerable power, though lesser than their sovereigns. These demons commanded anywhere from 30 to 40 legions each, executing the will of their superiors while maintaining their own spheres of influence. The Testament lists numerous dukes among the 72, spirits whose names carried weight in the hierarchies of darkness. Astaroth, Barbatos, and Gushan numbered among them, each a formidable entity in its own right, each bringing specialized knowledge or abilities that made them valuable or perhaps dangerous to Solomon's purposes. The princes occupied a unique position within this structure. Neither as powerful as kings nor as numerous as dukes, the princely demons possessed authority derived more from their ancient lineage and specialized domains than from the size of their legions. Stolas commanded 26 legions, but was respected for his vast knowledge of astronomy and precious stones. Vasago, governing the same number, was renowned for his ability to reveal hidden things and predict future events. Lower still in the hierarchy came the marquises and earls, demons whose power was measured not in hundreds but in dozens of legions. A marquis might command 30 legions, an earl the same or slightly fewer. Yet even these lesser nobles of hell possessed capabilities that made them objects of both fear and fascination. They could grant knowledge of the arts and sciences, reveal the locations of hidden treasures, or teach languages both living and dead. The knights and presidents formed the lower tiers of this demonic peerage. Knights typically commanded between 20 and 30 legions, while presidents might govern similar numbers or fewer. Despite their lesser rank, these spirits were no less dangerous or potentially useful than their superiors. The Testament describes how some possessed knowledge of philosophy and liberal sciences, while others could teach the properties of herbs and stones or grant familiarity with the nature of birds and beasts. This elaborate hierarchy served a purpose beyond mere organization. It represented a complete inversion of celestial order, a kingdom built upon rebellion and maintained through force and cunning. When Solomon bound these spirits to his service, he was not simply commanding individual demons, but bringing an entire government of darkness under his authority. The ring's power worked through the existing structure, compelling obedience from the kings, which in turn ensured compliance from all who served beneath them. The legions themselves remain somewhat mysterious in the Testament's account. Were these organized groups of lesser demons, or did the term represent a measure of pure demonic power? The text suggests both interpretations might hold truth. A legion implied both authority over subordinate spirits and a reservoir of dark force that the commanding demon could direct toward various ends. When Solomon commanded Baal or Paimon, he gained access not only to that demon's personal abilities, but to the collective power of all who served under them. Chapter 5. The first hierarchies, kings and dukes of the infernal court. Understanding this structure of command, Solomon reportedly began his work with those who held the highest positions. The Testament names Baal first among the 72, a king whose authority extended over 66 legions. Ancient sources describe his appearance as peculiarly shifting, sometimes manifesting with 3 heads, those of a cat, a toad, and a man crowned with royal insignia. Others recorded that he appeared as a man, or as one of these creatures exclusively, adapting his form to circumstances or the will of his summoner. His voice, when he spoke, emerged hoarse and difficult to comprehend without careful attention. The power attributed to Baal centered on invisibility and cunning. Those who successfully bound him could supposedly gain the ability to move unseen, a gift with obvious applications, both mundane and mystical. Solomon, according to the legend, employed this demon's knowledge during the temple's construction, using supernatural concealment to protect certain sacred operations from profane eyes. Following Baal in the hierarchy stood Agares, described as a duke commanding 31 legions. The texts paint him as an old man riding upon a crocodile, with a hawk perched upon his fist, presenting an image that blended authority with predatory nature. His particular expertise lay in languages and in causing earthquakes. The Testament suggests that Solomon used Agares to teach workers from distant lands to understand one another, facilitating the international cooperation necessary for his architectural ambitions. The earthquake power remained unused, kept in reserve as a potential weapon should rebellion threaten. Vasago occupied a position of prince, governing 26 legions. Unlike many of his fellows, Vasago bore a reputation for truthfulness, a quality considered rare and valuable among spirits known for deception. His gift lay in discovering hidden things and declaring events of past and future. The king supposedly consulted this demon when precious materials went missing during construction, or when he needed insight into the intentions of neighboring rulers. Samigina, also called Gamigin, held the rank of marquis with 30 legions under his command. His form appeared as a small horse or ass, though he would assume human shape when commanded. His knowledge encompassed liberal sciences and the accounting of souls departed from mortal life. Solomon employed him, tradition holds, to instruct the temple scribes in mathematics and geometry, ensuring the precision necessary for the building's sacred proportions. Marbus, a president governing 36 legions, manifested as a great lion but would take human form at the summoner's request. His abilities included causing and curing diseases, providing knowledge of mechanical arts, and transforming men into different shapes. The Testament records that Solomon kept this demon bound under particularly strict conditions, wary of the chaos that an unchecked shape-shifting might introduce among his workers. These demons, diverse in form and function, shared one common element: their submission to the seal upon Solomon's ring. Each required specific protocols for safe summoning and binding, knowledge that the Testament preserves in its instructions. The text emphasizes that approaching these entities without proper preparation invited disaster, regardless of the authority one might claim. Chapter 6. Demons of Prophecy, Seekers of Hidden Treasures and Secret Knowledge. Beyond those demons who shaped matter and healed bodies, stood others whose powers reached into realms invisible. Certain entities bound by Solomon possessed the ability to pierce the veils of time and space, revealing what lay concealed from mortal perception. The Testament records how the king employed these particular demons to locate treasures buried deep beneath Jerusalem's foundations and to divine knowledge that would ensure his kingdom's prosperity. Barbatos numbered among the most significant of these prophetic spirits. He held the rank of duke, commanding 30 legions, and appeared in the form of a hunter with 4 kings bearing him upon a chariot. His abilities included understanding the speech of animals, discovering hidden treasures, and reconciling disputes between friends. Most remarkably, he could discern past and future events, though the Testament notes that Solomon approached such knowledge with careful deliberation, aware that foreknowledge carried its own burdens. Bur manifested when the sun occupied Sagittarius, taking the form of a star with 5 rays or appearing as a wheel that rolled forward. This president commanded 50 legions and possessed profound knowledge of philosophy, logic, and the virtues of all herbs. He could heal all diseases and provide familiars of excellent quality to those who summoned him properly. Chapter 7. Shifting Forms, the Demons of Deception and Transformation. Yet among the entities Solomon bound, some possessed an ability that transcended even prophetic vision, the power to alter their very appearance at will. These demons of transformation appeared in multiple guises, their true nature concealed beneath layers of illusion and metamorphosis. The Testament records how Solomon learned to penetrate these deceptions, compelling each spirit to reveal its authentic form before accepting its service. Alice is ranked among the most striking of these shapeshifters. This duke commanded 36 legions and appeared first as a soldier mounted upon an enormous horse. His face bore the unmistakable features of a lion, with skin of ruddy complexion and eyes that blazed with fierce light. Yet the Testament notes a curious detail. His voice emerged muffled and indistinct, as though he spoke through layers of concealment even when visible. He taught astronomy and liberal sciences, his knowledge spanning the movements of celestial bodies. Andras presented an even more unsettling aspect, manifesting with an angel's body but the head of a raven, completely black. He rode upon a powerful wolf and carried a sharp sword in his hand. Chapter 8. The Ritual of Summoning, Methods to Call and Control Demons. The Testament commanded 30 legions and sowed discord with terrifying efficiency. Solomon recognized that such entities required the most stringent controls, for Andras possessed the power to destroy both the summoner and those around him if proper precautions failed. The binding of shapeshifters like these taught Solomon essential principles that would inform his entire system of demon control. The ancient text reveals that Solomon's method of summoning relied upon specific ritual procedures, each element carefully designed to establish dominance over the spirits he called forth. The king did not approach these entities as supplicants, but as a divinely appointed authority, wielding power granted directly by God. This hierarchical relationship formed the foundation of every successful conjuration recorded in the Testament. The primary instrument of Solomon's power remained the legendary ring, inscribed with the ineffable name of God. According to the text, the archangel Michael delivered this signet to Solomon, and its mere presence compelled obedience from demonic forces. Yet the ring alone proved insufficient. Solomon employed a complex system of ritual elements, each serving a specific protective or coercive function. The summoning circle represented the first line of defense. Solomon inscribed these protective boundaries using specific materials, creating a sacred space that demons could not cross without permission. The Testament describes circles marked with divine names and angelic seals, their geometry precisely calculated according to ancient wisdom. Within this boundary, the summoner stood protected, while the demon manifested in a designated area outside the circle's perimeter. The preparation for summoning required rigorous spiritual purification. Solomon fasted and prayed, cleansing himself of any corruption that might provide demons with leverage against him. The text emphasizes that moral authority proved as essential as ritual knowledge. A summoner compromised by sin offered demons opportunities for rebellion or deception. Solomon's righteousness, granted by divine favor, established his unquestionable superiority over the entities he commanded. The actual invocation employed powerful names and formulae. Solomon spoke words of power that resonated through both material and spiritual realms, compelling demons to appear against their will. The Testament records specific phrases, though many remain obscured by time and translation. These incantations combine divine names with commands, leaving no ambiguity about the summoner's authority or the demon's obligation to obey. Upon manifestation, demons often attempted deception or intimidation. They appeared in terrifying forms, seeking to unnerve the summoner and break his concentration. Solomon learned to see through these illusions, demanding that each spirit reveal its true nature before proceeding. This initial confrontation established the power dynamic for all subsequent interactions. Any hesitation or fear on Solomon's part might encourage demonic resistance. The binding itself required the demon to swear oaths of service. Solomon compelled each entity to speak its true name, acknowledge its specific abilities, and accept assigned tasks. The Testament records these exchanges in detail, showing how Solomon extracted complete information before granting the demon any concessions. Knowledge represented power in these negotiations, and Solomon refused to accept service from spirits whose nature remained unclear. Physical tokens often sealed these agreements. Solomon employed talismans, inscribed objects, and ritual implements to maintain control over bound demons. Some spirits received specific vessels or prisons, containers that limited their freedom while directing their energies toward assigned tasks. The Testament describes brass vessels sealed with Solomon's ring, each containing a demon compelled to eternal service. Yet the text also warns of inherent dangers. Summoning demons invited catastrophic risks, even for one as divinely favored as Solomon. A single error in ritual procedure might allow a demon to break free, with devastating consequences. The Testament records moments when demons tested Solomon's defenses, seeking weaknesses they might exploit. Only perfect execution of ritual protocols, combined with unwavering faith, ensured the summoner's safety. The most powerful demons required additional precautions. Entities commanding multiple legions possessed strength that ordinary bindings could scarcely contain. Solomon developed hierarchical systems of control, binding lesser demons through their superiors. By commanding a prince or duke, he gained authority over all entities in that demon's legion. This efficient approach allowed Solomon to direct vast demonic forces without individually binding each spirit. The Testament emphasizes that Solomon never summoned demons for trivial purposes. Each conjuration served the construction of the temple or addressed specific threats to Israel's welfare. This purposeful approach reflected divine sanction for Solomon's work. The king functioned as God's instrument, wielding power that would prove catastrophic in less righteous hands. The text implies that Solomon's eventual downfall stemmed partly from growing casual in his approach to demonic forces, allowing familiarity to erode proper caution. Modern readers might wonder at the practical application of these ancient rituals. The Testament presents its procedures as literal historical fact, describing real methods employed by an actual king. Whether understood as authentic magical practice or allegorical teaching, the text reveals sophisticated understanding of psychological and spiritual dynamics. Solomon's methods combined authority, preparation, protection, and purpose into a comprehensive system designed to manage beings of immense and dangerous power. Chapter 9. The Limits of Power, the Price of Command. Yet Solomon's mastery over demonic forces, comprehensive as it appeared, contained inherent limitations that the Testament reveals with careful attention. The ring's power, though formidable, depended entirely on the divine authority channeled through it. Without God's sanction, the seal became merely decorative metal. This fundamental dependence created vulnerability that Solomon himself would eventually demonstrate through tragic error. The Testament records instances where demons resisted Solomon's commands despite his authority. Orneus, the first demon bound, initially refused Solomon's summons even after receiving the ring. Only when Solomon invoked the Almighty directly did the demon yield. This pattern repeated throughout Solomon's dealings with particularly powerful entities. The king's personal authority meant nothing without constant acknowledgement of its divine source. Pride or presumption immediately weakened his control. Certain demons possessed knowledge or abilities that exceeded Solomon's capacity to command. When questioning Beelzebul about future events, Solomon learned that even the prince of demons could not reveal everything. Some knowledge remained sealed, accessible only to divine beings. Similarly, some forms of demonic power resisted redirection toward constructive purposes. Demons of destruction could assist in quarrying stone, but struggled when assigned tasks requiring genuine creativity or positive construction. Their nature imposed limitations on their usefulness. The Testament describes how prolonged exposure to demonic forces affected Solomon himself. Early interactions show the king maintaining rigorous protective protocols and constant prayer. Later passages reveal growing casualness in his approach. Solomon began conversing with demons as if with ordinary advisors, asking questions beyond strict necessity, allowing curiosity rather than purpose to guide interrogations. This gradual erosion of boundaries marked the beginning of Solomon's spiritual decline. The text specifically mentions Solomon's interest in demonic perspectives on cosmology, philosophy, and the nature of evil itself. While some knowledge gained served legitimate purposes, much satisfied mere intellectual curiosity. Solomon began spending hours questioning bound demons about subjects unrelated to the temple's construction. The king developed what modern readers might recognize as fascination bordering on obsession, drawing him deeper into the demonic realm than wisdom permitted. Demons recognized Solomon's growing vulnerability. The Testament records subtle shifts in demonic responses as Solomon's spiritual vigilance weakened. Entities that once cowered before the ring began offering unsolicited advice, flattering the king's wisdom, suggesting their continued service might benefit Israel beyond the temple's completion. These suggestions, seemingly helpful, actually worked to extend demonic influence over Solomon's thinking. The king who had bound demons now found himself increasingly bound by their perspectives. The Testament connects Solomon's gradual compromise to his later downfall through foreign wives and idolatry. While canonical biblical texts attribute Solomon's apostasy primarily to marital alliances, the Testament suggests deeper spiritual corruption. Prolonged exposure to demonic entities, even in the context of commanding them, contaminated Solomon's spirit. The king who conversed daily with demons found himself less shocked by practices those entities promoted. Boundaries that once seemed absolute gradually blurred. The text describes specific moments where Solomon's judgment faltered. Demons suggested that understanding their worship practices would help Solomon protect Israel from such influences. The king agreed, reasoning that knowledge of evil strengthened resistance to it. Yet observing demonic rituals, even in the name of wisdom, introduced images and concepts that lingered in Solomon's consciousness. The Testament implies that Solomon's later tolerance for idolatrous practices among his wives stemmed partly from this spiritual desensitization. Another crucial limitation involved the ring's transferability. While Solomon commanded demons through divine authority, that authority could not be fully delegated to others. The king discovered this when attempting to assign overseers for demonic workers. Human supervisors lacked sufficient spiritual protection to command demons directly. They could relay Solomon's orders, but possessed no independent authority. This limitation meant Solomon himself had to maintain constant oversight, a burden that grew as projects multiplied and demons numbered in the thousands. The Testament records Solomon's attempt to create additional binding implements, supplementing the ring with engraved stones and consecrated vessels. These objects possessed some efficacy, but never matched the ring's power. Solomon learned that divine authority could not be manufactured through ritual or replicated through technique. Each binding ultimately depended on God's active involvement. This realization should have humbled Solomon, but instead frustrated him, driving him to seek workarounds that further compromised his spiritual integrity. Demonic resistance took forms beyond simple refusal. Some entities complied with Solomon's commands while subtly undermining their spirit. Asked to cut stone, demons did so but deliberately worked slowly or produced irregular blocks requiring additional finishing. Commanded to transport materials, they chose inefficient routes or dropped loads unnecessarily. Solomon found himself spending enormous energy, not just commanding demons but ensuring their full cooperation. The Testament suggests this constant vigilance exhausted Solomon spiritually and mentally. The text also reveals theological tensions inherent in Solomon's work. By commanding demons to construct God's temple, Solomon created a situation where evil beings contributed directly to sacred purposes. While God clearly sanctioned this arrangement, it troubled some observers. Priests questioned whether stones touched by demonic hands could truly form a holy structure. Solomon defended his methods, arguing that demons functioned merely as tools, their participation no different from using metal ore extracted from unholy mines. Yet doubts persisted, and the Testament implies these concerns held prophetic weight regarding the temple's eventual fate. Solomon's growing dependence on demonic labor created practical vulnerabilities. As construction progressed, the king relied increasingly on supernatural assistance for tasks human workers could accomplish. This dependency weakened Israel's ordinary labor force and skills. When demonic assistance eventually ended, Solomon's kingdom lacked sufficient human expertise to maintain the infrastructure demons had built. The Testament presents this as cautionary evidence that supernatural shortcuts, even divinely sanctioned ones, carry long-term costs. The ring itself became a source of temptation. Knowing he possessed ultimate authority over demonic forces, Solomon found himself considering applications beyond the temple's construction. Could demons serve as spies, gathering intelligence about foreign nations? Might they assist in battle, terrifying Israel's enemies? The Testament records Solomon entertaining such thoughts, though apparently never acting on them. The mere consideration, however, revealed how power's availability eroded proper restraint. Solomon began thinking like someone who could do anything rather than someone who should do only what God commanded. Chapter 10. The Testament's enduring legacy, from medieval grimoires to modern occultism. The theological questions surrounding Solomon's demonic workforce eventually faded as the temple neared completion, but the knowledge Solomon accumulated during construction proved remarkably durable. The Testament of Solomon, written centuries after these events supposedly occurred, preserved not merely historical memory but something more practical, a comprehensive catalog of demonic entities with detailed instructions for commanding them. This transformation from royal chronicle to operational manual ensured the text's survival through ages when many ancient works disappeared entirely. Medieval scribes approached the Testament with profound ambivalence. Christian monasteries, the primary preservers of ancient texts, recognized the document's significance while fearing its content. Copying the manuscript exposed scribes to detailed demonic information, knowledge church authorities considered spiritually dangerous. Yet the text claimed biblical authorization through Solomon's divinely granted ring, creating theological complications. Could knowledge explicitly sanctioned by God become forbidden simply through time's passage? Monastic libraries resolved this tension inconsistently. Some institutions maintain Testament copies in restricted collections, accessible only to senior clergy. Others refuse the text entirely, though such refusals paradoxically acknowledge the manuscript's power. The Testament's preservation owed much to its ambiguous genre. Unlike purely theological works or obvious grimoires, the text occupied uncertain territory between biblical commentary and magical instruction. Its narrative framework, presenting Solomon's exploits as historical events, provided cover for content that might otherwise face ecclesiastical censorship. Scribes could justify copying the Testament as documenting biblical history rather than transmitting forbidden knowledge. This protective ambiguity enabled the text's circulation even during periods of intense scrutiny regarding magical literature. Jewish communities maintained particularly complex relationships with the Testament. While the document celebrated Judaism's greatest king, its Christian interpolations and demonological focus troubled rabbinic authorities. The text presented Solomon engaging extensively with forces Jewish law strictly prohibited contacting. Moreover, the Testament's emphasis on commanding demons contradicted rabbinic teachings that such entities should be avoided entirely rather than controlled. Yet Solomon's reputation as wisdom's embodiment prevented outright rejection. Jewish scholars acknowledged the Testament while arguing its authenticity remained questionable, a measured response allowing engagement with the text without endorsing its magical content. Islamic traditions knew the Testament through adapted versions that aligned better with Quranic narratives. Muslim scholars recognize Sulaiman, as Solomon was known in Arabic sources, as a prophet possessing extraordinary authority over spirits called jinn. The Quran explicitly mentioned Sulaiman commanding such beings during construction projects, providing theological foundation for Testament-like narratives. Islamic versions typically emphasized Sulaiman's prophetic status more strongly than Christian manuscripts, presenting demon commanding as divine miracle rather than learned technique. This reframing made the text more compatible with Islamic theology, while preserving its core content. The transition from late antiquity to the medieval period witnessed the Testament's gradual integration into broader grimoire traditions. Magical practitioners recognized the text's value as authoritative precedent. If Solomon, blessed by God himself, commanded demons through specific rituals, then those rituals possessed legitimacy other magical operations lacked. The Testament became a source text, its demons and binding techniques referenced throughout medieval magical literature. Authors of new grimoires cited Solomon's authority to validate their own instructions, creating genealogies linking contemporary magic to biblical precedent. The Lesser Key of Solomon, compiled during the medieval period, represented this process's culmination. This influential grimoire organized Testament material into systematic form, expanding Solomon's 72 demons into detailed hierarchies with specific conjuration requirements. The Lesser Key preserved Testament demons' names, attributes, and appearances while adding elaborate ritual frameworks for summoning them. Where the Testament presented demons as problems Solomon encountered and solved, the Lesser Key transformed them into resources magicians could deliberately access. This shift from historical chronicle to operational manual reflected the text's evolution from biblical narrative to practical grimoire. Medieval magicians found the Testament particularly valuable for its specificity. Unlike theoretical magical texts discussing general principles, the Testament provided concrete details, demons' exact names, their physical descriptions, their particular powers, and methods for controlling them. A practitioner seeking to bind Ornias, the strangulation demon, could find precise instructions in the Testament rather than inferring techniques from general demonological theory. This practical utility ensured the text's continued relevance, even as magical philosophies changed across centuries. The Testament's demons infiltrated medieval Christian art and architecture. Cathedral sculptors creating grotesques and gargoyles drew inspiration from the text's vivid descriptions. Ornias, with his leonine body and dragon wings, appeared in stone on church facades, serving apotropaic functions by representing evil forces the sacred building repelled. Manuscript illuminators decorating religious texts incorporated Testament demons into marginal illustrations, their monstrous forms warning against spiritual complacency. This artistic adoption spread Testament imagery far beyond magical practitioners, embedding its demonic catalog in broader medieval visual culture. Theological debates regarding the Testament intensified during the High Middle Ages as universities developed more sophisticated demonological frameworks. Scholastic theologians questioned whether Solomon's techniques remained viable under Christian dispensation. Christ's incarnation and sacrifice had fundamentally altered humanity's relationship with spiritual forces. Did methods effective under Old Covenant conditions still function afterward? Some theologians argued Solomon's authority derived from pre-Christian circumstances that no longer applied. Others maintained that divine sanction made Solomon's techniques permanently valid, regardless of dispensational changes. These debates rarely achieved consensus, but demonstrated the Testament's continued theological relevance. The Renaissance brought renewed interest in ancient texts, including the Testament. Humanist scholars sought original manuscripts, comparing versions to establish authoritative texts. This philological attention revealed the Testament's complex transmission history, with different manuscript families preserving varying daemon lists and binding techniques. Renaissance occultists particularly valued the Testament as representing ancient wisdom corrupted by medieval copyists. They pursued what they considered textual restoration, attempting to reconstruct original versions from contaminated manuscripts. These efforts, though questionable by modern scholarly standards, demonstrated the Testament's persistent appeal to learned audiences. Renaissance magic distinguished between natural magic, which manipulated hidden properties of physical objects, and ceremonial magic, which commanded spiritual entities. The Testament clearly exemplified ceremonial magic, offering direct spiritual interaction rather than naturalistic techniques. This categorization attracted practitioners seeking systematic approaches to spiritual forces. The text provided structured methodology, where other magical traditions offered only fragmented techniques. Solomon's organized demon catalog, with its clear hierarchies and specific binding procedures, appealed to Renaissance minds seeking order in occult studies. The printing press's development revolutionized Testament transmission. Manuscripts previously confined to monastic libraries or private collections became available through printed grimoires incorporating Testament material. This democratization alarmed ecclesiastical authorities, who recognized that widespread distribution multiplied the text's potential dangers. Printed grimoires reached audiences lacking theological training to contextualize Testament content properly. Church officials feared unsupervised laypeople might attempt Solomon's techniques without understanding their spiritual risks. Yet censorship proved largely ineffective. Printed grimoires circulated despite official prohibitions, their forbidden status arguably enhancing their appeal. Protestant Reformation dynamics complicated Testament reception. Protestant theologians generally rejected magical traditions associated with Catholic practices, viewing them as superstitious corruptions of biblical truth. Yet Solomon's Testament presented difficulties for this dismissal. The text claimed biblical foundation and portrayed Jewish practices predating Catholic innovations. Protestant scholars handled this tension through various strategies. Some dismissed the Testament as apocryphal fabrication, regardless of its claimed origins. Others acknowledged Solomonic demon binding as historically authentic, while arguing such practices belonged exclusively to Israel's unique covenant relationship, making them inappropriate for Christian adoption. Catholic Counter-Reformation authorities maintained earlier ambivalent positions toward the Testament. Official church teaching condemned demon invocation as inherently sinful, yet Catholic demonology acknowledged demons' existence and capacities in ways requiring engagement with texts like the Testament. Catholic exorcism manuals borrowed Testament techniques, adapting demon-commanding methods for purportedly defensive purposes. This created apparent contradictions where church officials condemned the Testament as dangerous grimoire while incorporating its methods into sanctioned ritual practices. The distinction rested on claimed intent. Summoning demons for personal gain remained sinful, while commanding them for spiritual protection supposedly differed morally. Early modern witch trials occasionally reference Testament material. Prosecutors accused defendants of attempting Solomonic magic, presenting Testament manuscripts as evidence of demonic pacts. These prosecutions revealed popular awareness of Testament content even among uneducated populations. Defendants sometimes admitted seeking demon control through Solomonic methods, believing biblical precedent legitimized their actions. Such admissions typically failed as legal defenses. Courts ruled that whatever authority Solomon possessed died with him, making contemporary demon commanding categorically demonic rather than divinely sanctioned. Trial records thus documented both Testament circulation and its controversial status in early modern Europe. The Enlightenment brought rationalist critiques dismissing the Testament as primitive superstition. Enlightenment philosophers rejected demonic existence entirely, viewing Testament narratives as embarrassing evidence of humanity's credulous past. Yet this dismissal proved incomplete. Rationalist rejection applied primarily to literal belief in Testament events, not to the text's historical or cultural significance. Scholars continued studying the Testament as evidence for ancient magical practices and belief systems. This shift from belief to analysis enabled academic Testament engagement freed from theological constraints. Universities could examine the text as historical artifact without endorsing its supernatural claims. Romantic-era culture partially rehabilitated Testament demons through literary adoption. Gothic novels borrowed Testament imagery, incorporating Solomonic demons into fictional narratives. These literary appropriations severed demons from their original religious contexts, transforming them into aesthetic objects divorced from belief systems. Readers could appreciate Testament demons as imaginative creations without accepting their objective existence. This aesthetic secularization allowed Testament material to reach audiences who would reject the text's theological claims while embracing its narrative richness. 19th century occult revival movements rediscovered the Testament as practical resource. Organizations like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn incorporated Testament demons into their ceremonial systems, viewing Solomon's techniques as preserving ancient wisdom corrupted by exoteric religions. These groups distinguished between vulgar superstition, which they rejected, and genuine occult science, which they claimed the Testament represented. Revival occultists approached the Testament as encoded technical manual, requiring proper training to decode and apply safely. This interpretation positioned them as restoring authentic practices religious authorities had suppressed. The Golden Dawn's particular contribution involved synthesizing Testament material with other occult traditions. They correlated Testament demons with Kabbalistic Sephiroth, astrological influences, and tarot symbolism, creating elaborate correspondence systems. A demon from Solomon's catalog gained associations with specific planets, Hebrew letters, and tarot cards, embedding it within comprehensive symbolic frameworks. These synthetic systems transform Testament demons from discrete entities into components of universal occult structures. This systematization appealed to practitioners seeking coherent magical worldviews rather than fragmentary techniques. Aleister Crowley, perhaps the 20th century's most infamous occultist, engaged extensively with Testament material. Crowley viewed Solomon as predecessor magician, whose work anticipated his own magical philosophy. He performed operations invoking Testament demons, recording results in magical diaries. Crowley's treatments combined respect for Testament tradition with willingness to modify techniques based on personal experimentation. He argued that while Solomon's methods were fundamentally sound, they required updating for modern practitioners. Crowley's influential writings ensured Testament material remained relevant within 20th century occult movements. Academic demonology emerged as scholarly discipline, examining belief systems surrounding demons historically. Testament scholars approached the text as primary source for ancient and medieval demonological concepts. They analyzed the Testament's demon catalog for patterns revealing cultural anxieties and religious developments. Orneus, the strangulation demon, for instance, reflected ancient fears about sudden death and its causes. Academic analysis stripped Testament demons of supernatural claims while treating them seriously as cultural phenomena worthy of rigorous study. This scholarly attention paradoxically maintained Testament relevance even among audiences dismissing its metaphysical premises. Psychological interpretations reframed Testament demons as projections of internal conflicts. Carl Jung's depth psychology particularly influenced such readings. Jungian analysts interpreted Solomon's demon binding as symbolic individuation process, with demons representing shadow aspects requiring integration rather than external entities demanding control. This psychological reframing allowed modern audiences to engage Testament narratives without accepting literal demonology. Solomon's confrontations with specific demons became archetypal encounters with universal psychological challenges. The Testament transformed from magical instruction into depth, psychological text mapping inner spiritual terrain. Anthropological perspectives examined the Testament as evidence for cultural transmission between ancient Near Eastern traditions. Scholars trace Testament demons to Babylonian, Egyptian, and Persian sources, demonstrating how Jewish and early Christian cultures absorbed and adapted neighboring demonologies. This comparative approach revealed the Testament as syncretic document blending multiple cultural streams rather than representing purely Jewish traditions. Demons Solomon commanded often displayed characteristics borrowed from other civilizations' mythologies, showing how magical texts facilitated cross-cultural exchange during antiquity and the medieval period. Modern chaos magic movements approached the Testament with radical pragmatism. Chaos magicians argued that whether demons existed objectively mattered less than whether Testament techniques produced subjective results. They tested Solomonic methods empirically, judging success by psychological and practical outcomes rather than metaphysical correctness. This instrumental approach treated Testament demons as useful fictions or psychological constructs that could be productively engaged regardless of ontological status. Chaos magic thus sustained Testament practice while remaining agnostic regarding traditional theological claims. Popular culture discovered the Testament during the late 20th century, incorporating its demons into films, novels, and games. These appropriations typically simplified Testament material for entertainment purposes, but they spread awareness of Solomonic tradition to unprecedented audiences. Millions encountered Testament demons through media consumption who would never read grimoires or occult literature. This popularization created strange situations where ancient demons from esoteric texts became recognizable fictional characters, their Testament origins often forgotten. Orneus appeared in role-playing games as monster to defeat, completely severed from original theological context. Digital age occultism transformed Testament accessibility dramatically. Grimoires once requiring years of searching could be downloaded instantly. Online communities shared Testament knowledge freely, democratizing information previously controlled by initiated orders or academic specialists. This accessibility generated diverse interpretations as people without traditional training engaged Testament material directly. Internet forums hosted debates about demon existence, proper conjuration techniques, and Testament authenticity. Digital networks connected practitioners globally, enabling collaborative Testament study impossible in previous eras. Contemporary Wiccan and neo-pagan movements generally avoided Testament demons, viewing them as belonging to Abrahamic traditions incompatible with their own practices. These groups preferred gods and spirits from pre-Christian European traditions rather than engaging Jewish and Christian demonology. Yet some neopagans incorporated Testament material eclectically, arguing that effective magical techniques transcended particular religious contexts. This selective adoption demonstrated the Testament's continuing flexibility, with practitioners adapting its content to varied spiritual frameworks, despite its originally Jewish and Christian character. Academic biblical studies approach the Testament as pseudepigraphal text, valuable for understanding Second Temple Judaism and early Christianity. Scholars analyzed the Testament alongside other pseudepigraphal works, examining how communities attributed texts to revered figures like Solomon to claim authority. Testament studies illuminated beliefs about Solomon's powers during the periods when the text was composed and circulated. The document revealed what early Jewish and Christian communities thought Solomon should have done with divine authority, reflecting their own concerns about power, magic, and spiritual forces. Modern exorcism practices occasionally referenced Testament techniques, though typically unofficially. Catholic exorcists interviewed about their methods, sometimes mentioned consulting grimoires including Testament material for demon names and characteristics. This consultation occurred despite official prohibitions against magical texts. Practitioners justified such research as necessary intelligence gathering about adversaries rather than magical practice itself. Knowing demon names and tendencies supposedly aided exorcists in recognizing and combating them. This pragmatic approach blurred distinctions between condemned magic and sanctioned religious ritual. The Testament's influence extended into contemporary art movements. Surrealists found Testament demons inspiring for their bizarre combinations of animal features and uncanny powers. Artists created visual interpretations of Testament descriptions, producing paintings and sculptures depicting demons as Solomon supposedly encountered them. These artistic treatments neither endorsed Testament theology nor completely dismissed it, instead occupying ambiguous territory where demons functioned as creative stimuli. Testament material thus entered secular artistic discourse, appreciated aesthetically while remaining detached from religious commitments. Feminist reinterpretations of the Testament examined its gender dynamics critically. Scholars noted how Testament narratives centered male authority figures while relegating female characters to peripheral roles or demonizing feminine power. The Testament's demon catalog included entities embodying anxieties about female sexuality and autonomy. Feminist critics argued this reflected patriarchal structures in ancient Judaism and early Christianity. Yet some feminist practitioners reclaimed Testament material, rereading it to recover suppressed female spiritual authority. They highlighted moments when Testament women exercised power, using these to construct alternative narratives challenging the text's androcentric orientation. Environmental readings of the Testament emerged during late 20th century ecological movements. Scholars noted how Testament demons often embodied nature's threatening aspects: storms, disease, wild animals. Solomon's binding of these demons symbolically represented human attempts to control natural forces. Environmental critics question whether this control orientation contributed to destructive relationships with nature characterizing modern societies. They proposed alternative interpretations, where demons represented natural powers, deserving respect rather than domination. This ecological rereading challenged traditional Testament interpretations while demonstrating the text's continued capacity to generate new meanings. Post-colonial perspectives examined the Testament as part of Western occult traditions implicated in imperial projects. European colonizers often dismissed indigenous spiritual practices as demon worship, while themselves preserving Testament demonology. Critics highlighted this hypocrisy, noting how Western cultures condemned others for beliefs they themselves maintained in modified forms. Post-colonial scholars also traced how Testament demons were sometimes mapped onto indigenous spirits during colonization, demonizing native traditions. These analyses revealed Testament material as culturally embedded rather than universally applicable, shaped by particular historical power dynamics. The Testament's survival through millennia testifies to its remarkable adaptability. The text has functioned as biblical commentary, magical manual, theological problem, literary source, psychological allegory, anthropological evidence, and cultural artifact. Each era reinterpreted Testament material according to its own concerns while preserving core narratives about Solomon commanding demons. This interpretive flexibility enabled the Testament to remain relevant across drastically different cultural contexts. Contemporary discussions about the Testament increasingly acknowledge its composite nature. Modern scholars recognize the text as layered document, incorporating materials from different periods and traditions. The Testament we possess represents accumulated textual sedimentation rather than unified composition. This recognition complicates discussions about Testament authenticity. Rather than asking whether the Testament is authentic or fraudulent, scholars examine how various communities contributed to its development across centuries. The Testament becomes historical palimpsest, preserving traces of multiple belief systems. Digital humanities approaches now analyze Testament manuscripts computationally, mapping variations across versions and tracking textual transmission patterns. These methods reveal previously invisible relationships between manuscript families, clarifying how Testament materials spread geographically and evolved textually. Computational analysis confirms the Testament's complex history, showing how scribes modified content while copying, adding local demons or deleting material their communities found objectionable. This technological scholarship demonstrates that Testament study continues generating new insights through methodological innovation. The Testament's demons themselves have proven remarkably durable despite dramatic worldview shifts. Orania still appears in contemporary grimoires nearly 2 millennia after Testament composition. The demon's association with strangulation and his leonine draconic form persist across cultural transmissions. This continuity suggests Testament descriptions captured something psychologically or culturally resonant beyond their original contexts. Whether understood as literal entities, psychological archetypes, or cultural symbols, Testament demons continue functioning as meaningful figures. Modern esoteric publishers maintain Testament availability through new editions and translations. These publications serve diverse audiences, academic scholars, practicing occultists, curious readers, and collectors of esoteric literature. Publishers typically frame Testament editions carefully, providing historical context while avoiding explicit endorsement of magical practice. Introductions present the text as historically significant without claiming demons' objective existence or encouraging readers to attempt conjurations. This cautious positioning reflects ongoing tensions between Testament preservation and concerns about its practical application. The question of whether anyone successfully commands demons using Testament methods remains contested. Practitioners report varied experiences. Some claim successful demon binding following Testament procedures, describing encounters with entities matching textual descriptions. Skeptics attribute such reports to psychological phenomena, suggestion, pareidolia, or fabrication. No consensus exists regarding Testament techniques' actual efficacy, which perhaps indicates the impossibility of resolving such questions empirically. Experiential claims and skeptical dismissals coexist without synthesis. The Testament's treatment of Solomon's self has evolved across interpretations. Early readers accepted Solomon as historical figure whose exploits the text documented. Medieval audiences increasingly recognized legendary elaboration beyond biblical accounts. Modern scholars view Testament Solomon as literary character, embodying cultural ideals about wisdom, power, and divine favor rather than historical person. This characterological reading allows Testament engagement while bracketing questions about factual accuracy. Solomon becomes archetypal wise ruler whose narratives explore authority's responsibilities and temptations regardless of historical veracity. Contemporary practitioners adapting Testament methods often modify them significantly. Modern occultists rarely maintain the text's Jewish and Christian theological frameworks fully. They may invoke Testament demons while substituting pagan deities for the Abrahamic God, or employ Testament binding techniques within chaos magic paradigms unconcerned with traditional theology. These adaptations demonstrate both Testament influence and its transformation. The text provides foundational material that practitioners reshape according to personal spiritual orientations. Solomon's ring becomes metaphorical rather than literal, representing magical authority acquired through training rather than divine gift. The Testament raises ongoing questions about knowledge's moral status. If Solomon's demon catalog represents genuinely dangerous information, does preserving it constitute irresponsibility? Should such texts remain freely accessible or be restricted to qualified scholars? These questions have generated varied responses. Some argue information itself is morally neutral. Danger arises from misuse rather than knowledge per se. Others contend certain knowledge is inherently corrupting, its mere possession endangering the knower. The Testament has survived precisely because both positions remain arguable without definitive resolution. Educational institutions handle Testament material inconsistently. Some universities teach the Testament in religious studies courses as example of ancient demonological thought. Others avoid it despite its historical importance, deeming the content inappropriate for classroom discussion. These institutional choices reflect broader uncertainties about how modern secular society should approach religious texts, making supernatural claims. The Testament occupies particularly ambiguous territory, given its connection to biblical tradition, yet its focus on magical practices Christianity historically condemned. The Testament's contribution to demonology cannot be overstated. The text established conventions subsequent grimoires followed, systematic demon catalogs, detailed entity descriptions, specific conjuration procedures, and claims to divine authorization. Later, demonological works may have modified Testament specifics, but they adopted its organizational approach. Western demonology's characteristic features largely derive from patterns the Testament established. Even modern horror fiction's demon portrayals often unwittingly replicate Testament conventions. Solomon's Ring itself has become a cultural symbol far beyond Testament contexts. References to Solomon's Ring appear in literature, film, and common speech, often by people unfamiliar with Testament sources. The ring represents ultimate authority over dangerous forces, power to command what should not be controlled. This symbolic currency demonstrates Testament influence on cultural imagination, even where direct textual knowledge has faded. Solomon's Ring has become a mythic object whose meaning transcends its original context. The Testament ultimately raises profound questions about divine authority and human limitations. Solomon received his ring from God, yet his story suggests even divinely granted power carries dangers. The Testament never resolves whether Solomon's demon binding was ultimately wise or merely permitted. This ambiguity has sustained interpretive richness across centuries. Readers can view Solomon as an exemplary figure demonstrating proper power use or as cautionary tale about authority's corrupting influence. Both readings find textual support. The Testament's future likely involves continued reinterpretation. Each generation will read the text through its own conceptual frameworks, finding new meanings while preserving core narratives. Digital media may enable Testament engagement modes impossible previously: interactive editions, virtual reality demon encounters, artificial intelligence analysis of manuscript variations. Yet the fundamental questions the Testament raises about power, wisdom, and spiritual forces will likely persist regardless of technological changes. Solomon, confronting demons in his palace, remains a powerful narrative archetype. The text reminds us that ancient peoples grappled with questions modern societies still face. How should authority be exercised? What knowledge is too dangerous to pursue? Can evil be controlled without becoming corrupted? Do ends justify means when goals are righteous? The Testament addresses these questions through Solomon's demon-binding narrative, offering no simple answers but demonstrating their complexity. This thematic richness ensures continued relevance beyond the text's supernatural content. The Testament of Solomon survives, not despite its strangeness but because of it. The text offers windows into worldviews dramatically different from contemporary secular perspectives. It preserves ancient beliefs about invisible forces shaping reality, techniques for engaging those forces, and theological frameworks justifying such engagement. Modern readers may not accept Testament metaphysics, yet the text remains valuable as record of how people understood their world when demons seemed as real as weather patterns. The demons Solomon commanded continue their own curious existence. They persist in grimoires, literary works, artworks, films, games, and collective imagination. Ornius and his companions have outlived the temple they helped construct, the kingdom Solomon ruled, and countless generations who believed in their existence. Whether demons are understood as objective entities, psychological constructs, cultural symbols, or literary characters, Testament demons remain remarkably vital presences. Their survival across millennia constitutes strange immortality for beings representing mortality's threats. Solomon himself, or at least his literary representation, endures as archetype of wisdom applied and misapplied. The Testament presents a complex portrait beyond simple hagiography. Solomon possesses extraordinary gifts, yet faces genuine temptations. He accomplishes remarkable achievements, yet struggles with authority's dangers. This nuanced characterization makes Testament Solomon a compelling figure for continued reflection. He embodies both aspiration and warning, showing simultaneously what humans might accomplish with divine favor and how such accomplishment carries risks. The Testament's influence on Western occultism ensures its ongoing study by practitioners and scholars alike. As long as people pursue esoteric knowledge or study those pursuits historically, the Testament will remain relevant. New translations and editions will appear. Academic conferences will feature Testament papers. Practitioners will test its techniques. Artists will visualize its demons. The text has demonstrated remarkable capacity to inspire continued engagement across wildly different contexts. The Testament challenges neat categorization. It resists classification as purely religious text or magical manual or legendary narrative or theological treatise. It functions as all these simultaneously, its generic ambiguity contributing to its flexibility and survival. Readers approaching the Testament from different perspectives find different texts. Historians see evidence for ancient beliefs. Occultists find practical instructions. Theologians encounter doctrinal problems. Literary scholars appreciate narrative artistry. This multiplicity enriches Testament study while complicating efforts to fix definitive interpretations. The text ultimately testifies to human fascination with boundaries between natural and supernatural, permitted and forbidden, human and demonic. Solomon's ring represents human desire to transcend limitations, to command forces beyond normal authority. The Testament both indulges this desire through Solomon's successes and cautions against it through narrative tensions. This dual movement captures something essential about religious and magical thinking: attraction to transcendent power combined with awareness of its dangers. The Testament of Solomon endures because it addresses perennial human concerns through memorable narrative. A wise king receives divine authority, faces supernatural threats, commands dangerous beings, constructs sacred building, and grapples with power's temptations. This story compresses multiple themes into unified narrative arc. Readers across centuries have found themselves in Solomon's situation metaphorically, even when rejecting demons literally. The Testament thus functions as powerful parable regardless of supernatural belief. As long as people wonder about invisible forces shaping their lives, question authority's proper limits, or imagine controlling what frightens them, the Testament will speak meaningfully. Solomon commanding demons offers mythic template for engaging life's uncontrollable aspects. Whether those demons are understood supernaturally or psychologically or socially matters less than the recognition that human existence involves confronting forces that resist easy management. The Testament provides one culture's framework for conceptualizing such confrontations. The text's journey from ancient composition through medieval transmission to modern interpretation demonstrates how cultural products transcend original contexts. The Testament's authors could not have imagined 21st century chaos magicians or digital humanities scholars or horror film directors, yet their text engages all these audiences productively. This cultural journey testifies to human imagination's ability to preserve and transform inherited traditions. The Testament we read today differs from ancient versions yet maintains recognizable continuity with them. Solomon's demons wait in the Testament's pages, ready to teach and threaten each new generation of readers. They offer knowledge about ancient beliefs, psychological insights, narrative entertainment, spiritual challenges, and scholarly puzzles. The Testament preserves these offerings not despite, but through its demon's monstrous strangeness. Orneus, with his leonine dragon form, strangling innocent victims, captured something about evil's nature that resonates beyond his ancient origins. The Testament of Solomon remains alive because people keep reading it, interpreting it, arguing about it, and finding new meanings within it. The text's survival depends not on institutional authority or canonical status, but on continued engagement across diverse communities. As long as someone opens the Testament with genuine curiosity about what it contains, Solomon's story perpetuates itself. The demons he commanded achieve immortality through textual preservation and continued interpretation. This testament endures, carrying ancient wisdom and warnings forward through time. Solomon's ring may have disappeared, the temple fallen, the kingdom scattered. But the knowledge Solomon recorded, willingly or otherwise, persists in manuscripts and printed books and digital files. The Testament survives as long as people wonder what Solomon knew, what powers he wielded, and what dangers he faced when he commanded 72 demons to build God's temple in Jerusalem.